History books sometimes have a way of cherry-picking facts to keep in, and which to leave out. So much so, several huge historical moments have secret forgotten moments that truly change the narrative. From a queen owning a leash-trained bear to a shocking lie that started the war to the hidden truth of the samurai, there are a lot of hidden tidbits from the past. I'm Mike with List 25, and here are 25 secrets the history books left out. But before we begin, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, notification bell. It truly helps the channel keep going. Thank you guys so much. Let's get into it. 25. Rosa Parks was not the first. When talking about prominent figures from the civil rights movement, Rosa Parks is at the top of the list. Rosa Parks taking her chosen seat on a Montgomery bus in 1955 single-handedly sparked the entire movement. Except, that's only half the story. 9 months before Parks became a household name, a teen girl named Claudette Colvin did the exact same thing. Sadly, the 15-year-old got zero credit for her act of brave defiance. It all happened on March 2nd, 1955, when Colvin took the bus home from high school. The driver demanded she give up her seat to a white woman, but the teen refused. She stood her ground that she paid her fare, that it was her constitutional right to stay where she was. It took no time for the cops to show up, cuff Colvin, and haul her to jail while her school books were scattered across the bus floor. Colvin was later quoted as saying, "My head was just too full of black history. You know, the oppression we went through." Why wasn't she front page news? Well, the Montgomery NAACP decided against using her case because she was pregnant and unmarried during the proceedings. They wanted someone who respectfully fit their idea of respectability politics. Colvin did, however, become one of 4 plaintiffs in the Browder v. Gale court case that overturned bus segregation laws in Montgomery and Alabama. She quietly ended the legal battle, moved to New York in 1958, and worked as a nurse for decades. Sometimes being the first doesn't make you famous, but it did make her a pioneer. 24. A fake testimony and the Gulf War. Have you ever wondered what started the Gulf War? There has to be a pretty solid reason for the public to get behind something like that, right? Except some of those reasons are manufactured in a boardroom instead of a war room. On October 10, 1990, a 15-year-old Kuwaiti girl named Naira changed the world. And not in a good way. Naira testified before the U.S. Congressional Human Rights Caucus, and it was explosive. She claimed to have witnessed Iraqi soldiers removing infants from incubators in a Kuwaiti hospital and leaving them to die on the cold, hard floor. It was a devastating story that sparked absolute outrage all over America. President George H.W. Bush loved retelling this tale and told the story at least 10 times in the following weeks, and word of these babies being scattered like firewood took the media by storm. It didn't take long for the Senate to authorize military action and start a war. Except, it was all a lie. In a shocking twist, Naira was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the U.S., Saud Nasser al-Sabah. She was coached by Lori Fitzpatrick, the vice president of PR firm Hale & Knowlton, to spin this false, horrifying narrative. Fitzpatrick not only spun this sordid tale, but also helped negotiate the $11.9 million campaign, which was paid for by the Kuwaiti government. They even created a front group called Citizens for a Free Kuwait to make it look even more legit. The truth came out when not a single human rights group or news outlet could confirm her story. And later, even the Kuwaiti's own investigators confirmed it was false. Unfortunately, by the time that truth came out in 1992, the war was already over and thousands had died. All based on one teenager's lie. 23. Charles Lindbergh was not the first. It's a widely held belief that Charles Lindbergh was the first person to fly across the Atlantic. His journey in 1927 was widely publicized and celebrated. He received accolades galore. But did you know he wasn't actually the first person to do it? On June 14th and 15th, 1919, 2 British pilots, John Alcock and Arthur Brown, completed the very first non-stop transatlantic flight. That's a whole 8 years before Lucky Lindy took to the skies. Alcock and Brown's adventure can only be described as pure aviation terror. They flew in a modified Vickers Vimy bomber from St. John's, Newfoundland to Ireland. On the way, the plane was covered in ice, the radio malfunctioned, and fog made navigation all but impossible. Their trip took 16 terrifying hours to complete, and the whole time, these two brave men nearly froze in their open cockpit as they lost all control and unintentionally performed loop-the-loops as they spun out and fell towards the Atlantic. They made it to the mainland and crashed nose first into a bog. Thankfully, the men were relatively okay. They were greatly celebrated and even received a 10,000-pound reward from the Daily Mail for their bravery. Did Lindbergh steal their thunder? Well, to his credit, he did all he could to give them credit. When he landed in Paris after his flight, he's quoted as saying, "Alcock and Brown showed me the way." So why do so many people think Charles was the first? Well, that's just a clever case of marketing. A solo trip that ended safely was a much better headline than two daredevils who nearly died crash landing in a swamp. 22. Some Victorian women could vote. Contrary to popular belief, not all Victorian women had to wait until the 20th century suffrage movement to cast a vote. Years and years before the suffragettes took to the streets, the Vestries Act of 1818 gave some unmarried women the right to vote in parish vestry elections. Not only were women allowed to cast their votes for constables, highway surveyors, and parish servants, but they were also allowed to hold office. A poll book from 1843 shows 30 women who voted regularly. The wealthiest was Grace Brown, who was entitled to 4 votes because of her high tax rates. Why weren't there more ladies voting in these parish elections? That comes down to advertising. Most women believed their hands were tied, and the women who were going to the ballot box were silent about their actions. They weren't about to make waves, especially when they were sometimes the only people to show up. They were quietly getting their way, so why rock the boat? Thankfully, by 1869, women across England and Wales won the right to vote in municipal elections. 21. Many future celebrities fought in World War II. Most people don't associate World War II with Hollywood glamour, but you'd be surprised to know how many of the silver screen elites signed up to fight. Jon Stewart was the first Hollywood actor to join the military. No, not the one from The Daily Show. At 6'3" and weighing only 138 pounds, he was almost denied for being too skinny. Instead of accepting that fate, he purposely bulked up and passed that second exam. He joined the 703rd Bomb Squadron and flew a total of 20 combat missions. Following his lead, Henry Fonda enlisted in the Navy. Johnny Carson served on the battleship USS Pennsylvania. Kirk Douglas joined as a patrol craft officer. And when Clark Gable joined the military, Adolf Hitler himself put a bounty on his head. While some actors stayed home to keep the masses entertained, these men made a patriotic move without publicity stunts or media attention. 20. The first black presidential candidate. When Barack Obama ran for president, the world was stoked to see a black man's name on the US presidential ballot for the first time in their lives. But, did you know he wasn't the first? George Edwin Taylor beat him by over a century when he ran for president in 1904. Taylor was born in Arkansas in 1857 to a free mother and an enslaved father. After the state kicked out all the free black people, he moved to Illinois, where his mother later passed away. He then ended up in Wisconsin as a child. He grew up to become a newspaper owner and soon a politician. Taylor was fed up with both major parties and joined the National Negro Liberty Party. The original candidate went to jail. Taylor stepped up and led the way. He ran against Teddy Roosevelt on a platform of equal rights and reparations for formerly enslaved folks. Taylor lost, and lost hard. He received fewer than 2,000 votes on Election Day. To his credit, it's said that there were ballot obstacles that prevented thousands more from being counted. The campaign ended his political career, but he cleared the path for others, and he still gets credit for this bombshell political move 100+ years later. 19. The first ATM. ATMs started popping up everywhere in the 70s and became a common way to do your everyday banking. In New York, Armenian-American inventor Luther Simjian created the bankograph, which allowed people to deposit cash, checks, and coins without having to stand in line to see a teller. You'd make your deposit and get a snapshot as a receipt. It was a one-way street, though. You could put money in, but you couldn't take it out. Unfortunately, the public didn't love the idea of trusting a machine to guzzle down their hard-earned paychecks and decided they'd rather do all their banking face-to-face. When the more modern ATMs were developed by Barclays 7 years later, they took London by storm. The upgraded technology made them far more trustworthy, and regular customers began to flock to them instead of the tellers. Was Luther too far ahead of his time? Maybe. He may not have succeeded in his venture, but this visionary sure did help change the way we do banking today. 18. The first woman in space. When people think of space heroes, they usually picture men like Yuri Gagarin and Neil Armstrong. But back in 1963, a 26-year-old textile factory worker from rural Russia named Valentina Tereshkova made history. She became the first woman to go to space. And she wasn't like the other astronauts either. She wasn't a pilot or a military member. She was just a girl who loved to skydive. That was more than enough to have her beaten the odds when the Soviet Union needed a cosmonaut to jump out of a spacecraft at 20,000 feet and parachute down to Earth. She blasted off on June 16, 1963 on board Vostok 6. This was a 3-day solo mission that had her orbiting the Earth 48 times before coming back. The landing was pure chaos. There was a programming error she had to fix before she took her legendary leap from the craft. Then, violent winds tangled her parachute. Luckily, she made it safely to a Russian field where villagers helped her out of her spacesuit. The Soviet Union's program for female cosmonauts ended after her historic flight, and women wouldn't fly in space for 19 more years. 17. TV's first mainstream gay drama. Most TV executives in 1959 thought the most controversial problem they'd face would be showing too much ankle skin on variety shows. Well, ITV definitely upped the ante that year. They developed a drama one-off TV play called South that shattered all the unwritten rules about what you could put on British television. The video was based on the French play that was banned in London theaters in 1955 for being too gay. The play follows a handsome Polish army officer named Jan, who becomes stuck on a southern plantation during the start of the Civil War. Jan was supposed to court the plantation owner's niece, but when he sets eyes on a handsome blonde officer named Eric, he couldn't contain his true feelings. This was during a time when being gay was still very much against the law, and the show had to speak in code. The word homosexuality was never used, but viewers weren't naive. Adding to that is the lead actor, Peter Wyngarde, who was a closeted gay actor, which made his performance all the more brave, especially for the time. The broadcast aired live and was nearly lost forever, but it was rediscovered in 2013 and was hailed as a milestone in LGBTQ+ culture by the BFI. 16. The first images of Christ. When we see images of Jesus, they're almost all the same nowadays. A beautiful celestial white man with long hair, a full beard, and robes that scream, "wise religious leader." He's an icon, truly, but the very first Christians had a very different idea of what the Son of God looked like. In 2014, archaeologists in southern Spain were able to put together pieces of a 4th century glass communion plate that shows Spain's oldest picture reference to Jesus Christ. And he didn't look anything like the image we see in Sunday school. This man had short, curly hair and a clean-shaven face. And instead of wearing his humble robes, he was draped in a toga like a Greek philosopher. He looked more like a Roman scholar than a carpenter from the Middle East. How did we go from that Jesus to the one we know today? Well, throughout history, Jesus has been depicted very differently. From a young beardless shepherd to a stunning figure with wavy hair, the artistic depictions were all over the place. There was even ancient graffiti showing him with a donkey's head. The Jesus we know today finally became the standard in the 6th century and has stuck around ever since. 15. The goddess of beer. Did you know that beer used to have its own goddess? Meet Ninkasi. Her name translates to the woman who fills the mouth. And she wasn't just some minor deity either. She was considered part of the divine court that was brewing beer for the gods. Back in 1800 BCE, the Sumerians worshipped her for her indulgences and the pleasure of drinking, and wrote entire hymns praising her. One of those even doubles as the world's first known recipe for the brew. Anchor Brewing even tried to recreate it in 1989. The results were a little different than the crafts we're used to. It's said to taste like champagne with a hint of dates. While this sweet treat didn't exactly take off in today's world, It was obviously popular in ancient times. Back there, beer wasn't just a drink, it was a way of life. Not only was it much safer than the canal waters, it was packed with nutrients and said to be blessed by the goddess herself. So the next time you enjoy a cold one on a hot day, make sure to tip your bottle to the sky and thank the goddess Ninkasi for your blessings. 14. Egyptians and the heart. Ancient Egypt is famous for its innovative ways. They truly were leaders of their times. They made great strides in math, engineering, and medical science. The ingenious creation of mummification famously changed the way their society handled the dead, but what they lacked was an understanding of the brain. In fact, they didn't even believe the brain served any purpose. To them, it was nothing but a lumpy mass in our heads. During the mummification process, they took great strides to keep the heart intact, believing it was needed in the afterlife, and treated it as the most precious organ. The brain? Not at all. They simply yanked it out through the nose and tossed it away. They believed the heart was the epicenter for everything human. To them, it was where we held all our emotions, memories, and thoughts. It was the record keeper of your entire life and held on to every single moment, the good and the bad. This gives a whole new meaning to lead with your heart and not your head. 13. The destructions of the Library of Alexandria. The absolute destruction of the Library of Alexandria is one of history's most devastating losses. The fires burned all of history's most precious records, erasing them for all of eternity. But that catastrophe may not even be the first time it was under attack. As it turns out, the library suffered multiple major strikes over time. Julius Caesar's naval battleships caught fire in 48 BCE, and the flames quickly spread to parts of the library and damaged many precious scrolls. Then, in 272, the fight against Queen Zenobia is thought to have obliterated the library's holdings. And that's not all. In 391, Bishop Theophilus supervised the absolute destruction of the Scipium Temple, which held the Daughters' Library. And, after centuries of attacks, neglect, and lack of political stability, the final blow came in 642, with the famous tale of Caliph Umar destroying the library. The Library of Alexandria didn't go out in a single horrifying blaze. It faded away over centuries. 12. Record keeping in the Inca Empire. The Inca Empire managed to pull off something incredibly remarkable with its record keeping. They were able to keep exact, organized records of their society without ever using a written language. Instead of developing a script, they used bundles of knotted strings called quipus. Each knot told a story. Every color and placement held a special meaning. This was mostly used for things like population counts and taxation, and to keep clear records of things like crops and supplies. While it's understood to be an accounting tool, some researchers theorize that these were more than just numbers. They carry a narrative of the Inca Empire's history, and believe that the code hasn't been fully cracked yet. 11. Henry VIII's executions. There is no husband in history more famous than Henry VIII. He married 6 times, had 2 of his wives publicly executed, and led a life of indulgence, greed, and terror. While the slaughtering of Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard are still talked about regularly to this day, they weren't even close to his only victims. It's said he also put close friends on that same chopping block the moment any suspicions arose. Historians believe this was the fate of Sir Thomas More, executed for refusing to support Henry's break from the Catholic Church. Chief Minister Thomas Cromwell also suffered at the hands of the king when he fell out of favor. And they weren't the only ones. Any and all noblemen and women were terrified of crossing the king. He ordered the slaughter of his own cousin, Henry Courtenay, and of Henry Pole, who was a member of one of England's most prominent families at the time. No one was safe with this murder-minded king on the throne. Back in Tudor England, no one was about to put their life on the line to call out a king who would not hesitate to say, "Off with their head." 10. Aztec priests and bloodletting. During the time of the Aztecs, blood was thought to be fuel for the universe. Priests and nobles were known for practicing blood rituals as a way to strengthen their connection to the gods, including daily bloodletting. Unlike public rituals, this one was done quietly and was a personal form of devotion. They would use sharp obsidian blades or cactus thorns to pierce their ears, tongues, and legs to draw blood and present it as an offering. To them, This wasn't some gruesome act, but a holy one. It was deeply symbolic. By shedding blood, priests believed they were giving life back to the gods they so deeply worshipped. The gods sacrificed themselves for the people, so what's a little blood to return the favor? It may sound extreme, but in the Aztec culture, it was a small wound, a tiny sacrifice, but it had a huge meaning to the divine. 9. Viking Raids. Vikings are known for pillaging and plundering to get their way. They would slaughter entire towns in a search for treasure and were ruthless. No one was safe when the Vikings came ashore. Men, women, and children were at their mercy. But are you aware that Vikings were sometimes not killing just for sport? Sometimes they did it as a form of population control. At the time, the population was growing faster than the resources could handle, and younger sons faced a future that was rather poor and bleak, especially since inheritance laws left them with nothing. Raiding was their only option. By sending the younger sons overseas, they relieved the strain on their Scandinavian land and got rid of the extra mouths to feed. The problem? Europe then became overcrowded. The solution? Raid more! They cleared out entire villages and towns to make room for their own. Death and displacement were rampant as the Vikings settled in and took over. It was brutal, it was horrific, and it was effective. They used violence as a form of social engineering, not giving 1 second of thought to the lives they took along the way. 8. Queen Elizabeth I's pets. Queen Elizabeth II is known for being an equine enthusiast and for having her beloved corgis by her side, but she had nothing on her namesake. Queen Elizabeth I loved all animals, especially the exotic. She kept various birds and monkeys and even a bear. Yes, a bear. Her menagerie could make any modern zoo jealous, and keeping her precious polar bear wasn't easy. It required special attendance and constant supervision. Not only would people who visited the palace get to marvel at the majestic creature, but they could also catch a glimpse of it on its daily walk along the Thames. Leashed, of course, like it was just some big dog. Talk about a spectacle. 7. Plague Doctors. The eerie outfits worn by plague doctors hold some of the most famous imagery from that part of history. Their long waxed coats, wide brim hats, gloves, and beak-like masks gave them a rather terrifying bird-like appearance. But that's what kept them as safe as possible at the time. Or at least that was the intention. But are you aware that the masks themselves weren't just for safety or show? The inside of the beak was filled with herbs, flowers, and spices. Doctors believed that disease traveled through bad air and that breathing in the mixture of lavender, dried mint, and rose petals would purify the oxygen before it reached their lungs. This idea goes back to medieval medicine. It was thought that if the air was bad, it was poison. Back then, this was science. In reality, though, the florals and herbs did absolutely nothing to kill bacteria. What it did do was mask the smell of death when they were in the plague-infested areas. 6. Japan's rice currency. Long before the creation of currency, Japan thrived on rice. And not just for food. Rice wasn't merely part of dinner. It represented wealth, wages, and taxes. Literally. Back in the samurai era, coins had very little value. Instead, koku, which is a unit of rice big enough to feed one person for a year, was the main trade. The more koku you had, the more power and respect you obtained. This worked well in society at the time. Rice was tangible, portable, and much needed. It was universally valued since everyone needed to eat. They used rice to fund construction, settled debts, and even paid their soldiers with it. If you were a rice farmer, you could have it all. And unlike coins, rice didn't change or decrease in value. A handful of rice meant more. It was brilliant, and turned a staple into a way to organize society. 5. Queen Elizabeth I's favorite pirate. For number 5, we have another forgotten fun fact about Queen Elizabeth I. She had a soft spot for Sir Francis Drake. This daring pirate impressed her greatly with his famous raid on Spanish treasure ships and world adventures. To her, he embodied courage, and she celebrated him as a national hero. She would lavish him with gifts and even present him with official recognition. But this fellow wasn't all he was cracked up to be. Outside of those medals and accolades, his entire career was based on violence. He enslaved indigenous people, outright attacked coastal towns in the Americas, and his wealth came from being a ruthless criminal, not a much beloved hero. His legacy was of blood and terror, leaving nothing but devastation and destruction in his wake. The Queen turned a blind eye to all of that, though. She adored this man and cheered on his cruelty. 4. Cats and fears of witchcraft. If you're an animal lover like me, you may not want to hear about what happened to cats in medieval Europe. You see, back then, cats were seen as less pets and more like targets, especially if the kitten just so happened to be black. This all came from the wild superstition that black cats were believed to be incarnations of the devil due to their association with witches. The fear ran so deep in society that entire communities would hunt down black cats and slaughter them by the dozens. They saw this as a way to cleanse the streets of evil. This misguided, horrific, and tragic fate for the kittens had an even worse one for humans. With no cats roaming around, the mouse and rat population was out of control. Thus, the plague was born. By eliminating what they thought was a supernatural threat, they faced the deadliest pandemic in recorded human history. Talk about karma. 3. Japanese samurai skills. Not only were these warriors fierce in battle and highly trained, but they were also masters of the arts. When they weren't wielding their swords, they wrote poetry and practiced calligraphy. They also studied philosophy, strategy, and literature. They truly trained their minds as much as they trained their bodies. They could leave a battle and write a stunning poem that gave them back any humanity they lost during the fight. This dual training made them even more effective. They were the best of the best on the battlefield, they were highly effective as administrators and advisors, and they contributed to the culture in beautiful ways. Their training on the field kept their bodies in top shape, and their training off kept their minds sharp and their humanity intact. They were the masters of war, education, and art. 2. Sea voyage insurance policies. Owning a watercraft today comes with a ton of responsibility. Insurance alone can get rather pricey, and surprisingly, insuring your boat isn't new. Long before modern insurance companies, ancient merchants were already protecting themselves from disasters. This goes back to Mesopotamia, Greece, and Rome, where traders would pool resources with investors to share the risk of setting sail. This meant that if a vessel sank or was lost at sea, no single merchant had to take the hit on their own. They shared loss. The shared loss meant recouping the loss was a shared responsibility. These contracts were shockingly sophisticated. There were legal agreements full of clauses that covered accidents, delays, destruction, and even pirate attacks. It was a serious financial safety net that meant the difference between fortune and bankruptcy. So yes, thousands and thousands of years ago, you could insure your boat. And just like now, it was a good idea to do so. 1. Paper money in Europe. Our final piece of forgotten history also links back to money. This time, though, it's how Europeans first reacted to the introduction of paper notes. To say that they didn't like it is an understatement. When it was first introduced to Europe, the people revolted. They didn't trust it at all. Coins had value in them due to the metals themselves, but paper? Well, that wasn't worth anything. They couldn't imagine putting such stock into something so ordinary. A famous example of this happened in 1668 in Stockholm's Banco. The bank started issuing paper notes, but it didn't go well. Poor management and overextension had people in a panic. Any confidence gained quickly fell apart, and it nearly destroyed the bank. People very quickly realized that the notes only held value if everyone valued them. And not everyone did. In today's world, cash is king. But back then, coins reigned supreme. It took years upon years for everyone to finally accept paper as common currency. And there you have it. 25 juicy secrets history books don't want you to know about. Which one shocked you the most? It's hard to imagine why some of these were kept secret and why they were forgotten with time. History is full of stories that never make it to the textbooks, and this list is just the tip of the iceberg. If you want to learn more, check out our other video, 25 Historic Mysteries Scientists Are Still Unraveling. I'll link it in the description box down below, and you should see it pop up here any second now. And now, for the best part of any video, trivia time. How many of you can answer this without looking it up? During the Middle Ages, what unusual method did some towns use to punish dishonest bankers? Was it A, making them kneel on rye bread for a day? B, dunking them in water until they confessed? C. Forcing them to swallow their own flour, or D. Pressing them under a giant loaf-shaped weight. Thank you guys so much for watching, and again, before you go, like, share, comment, subscribe, do all that fun stuff so you don't miss out on anything, and it truly helps the channel, like I said before. Now, I will catch you all in the next one. See ya.